Okay, so I'm going to talk about four main types of pollutants. First of all, pathogens, then agricultural chemicals, then chemical waste, and finally saltwater intrusion. So for pathogens, these include bacteria and parasites that can cause illness and death amongst humans. Examples of these are cholera, typhoid, bacteria which cause diarrhea, intestinal parasites such as Giardia and Cryptosporidium. And the source of these pathogens is animal and human waste. Animal waste can include wild animals such as squirrels, deer. It also includes farm livestock and pets such as dogs. So parasites and bacteria occur naturally in these wastes, and if the wastes come into contact with water and then the water's consumed by humans, then the pathogens can enter the human body and cause disease or death. Pathogens are a particular problem in low-income countries where sewage and water supply systems may not be well separated and there aren't systems in place for proper collection, treatment and disposal of human sewage. However, outbreaks of disease and also death can also occur in high-income countries where water treatment systems break down. And perhaps one of the more famous examples of this is the outbreak of Cryptosporidium, which is a protozoan parasite and affected the city of Milwaukee in the USA in 1993. A Cryptosporidium is a parasite which in this case is thought to have been spread by young lambs who were living in the catchment supplying water to the city. The outbreak occurred in spring when there are many lambs in the water supply catchment. Lambs are more susceptible to catching Cryptosporidium than adult sheep. And at the same time as there are all these infected lambs on the catchment, the water treatment system wasn't functioning properly. The filters which normally purify the water were performing badly, and so the Cryptosporidium parasites got through the sand filtration system and entered the water supply. As a result, about 400,000 people were estimated to be affected by diarrheal disease, and there were 12 estimated deaths as a result of the Cryptosporidium outbreak amongst those with less strong immune systems, the old and the young or the immunocompromised. So pathogens can be a problem with water supply and pollution in all parts of the world. The second main type of pollutants I'm going to talk about is water pollution caused by agricultural chemicals. The source of these pollutants are applications of fertilisers or pesticides to soils, to crops and to livestock in order to maximise the productivity of agricultural systems. And impacts can occur if excess chemicals are used or the chemicals aren't stored properly, so there's leakage and runoff, or if when the chemical is used any runoff is not managed properly. An example of this is the management of pesticide used in sheep dip to control parasites on sheep and the impacts on health. And if the pesticide isn't disposed of properly, it can run off or infiltrate into water resources and cause impacts both on human health and on animals living in water bodies. Another impact of agricultural chemicals is that of eutrophication, and this refers to when there are excess concentrations of nutrients from fertilisers that enter into rivers and lakes. And what happens is, with these high nutrient concentrations, that it stimulates plant growth, particularly algae in rivers and lakes, and the plant growth disturbs the natural ecosystem. The algae use up lots of oxygen when they die and break down in the water body, and that causes suffocation of fish because of the lack of oxygen. And this impacts on not just the ecosystem, but on the quality of water for other uses, and can have large economic impacts. And in fact, eutrophication is thought to be one of the major water pollution impacts worldwide, because it affects not just fresh waters, but also estuaries and river and marine systems. The impact of pesticides in water varies enormously depending on the nature of the chemical compounds, but also on how mobile they are and how they are transformed in the environment. So some compounds can break down quite rapidly, others may persist over years or decades and have long-term chronic effects on human health and on ecosystems. However, it's very complex to determine the exact effect of pesticides because of the interaction between different compounds. But it's generally thought that where there's exposure to a combination of compounds, then the most impacts can occur. The third type of water pollution I'm going to talk about is chemical waste. And this term covers many different sources. It includes municipal and industrial waste. It includes runoff and leaching from mining operations. And it can also include sewage. And sewage contains a whole cocktail of different materials. For example, personal care products such as soaps, detergents, sunscreen, fragrances, which all wash off in the shower or the bath and go to sewage treatment. But it can also contain nanomaterials, for example, from clothes washing or from chopping boards. It can also include unused medicines which are flushed down the toilet, or pharmaceuticals or contraceptives which are excreted. There's also increasing concern about microplastics in freshwater and marine systems which arise from the breakdown of municipal waste. And these materials can have physical impacts on animals and birds through ingestion and choking, but can also have chemical impacts as the materials break down within animals. Another emerging contaminant is nanomaterials, which I've mentioned already in sewage. And these are used in an increasing number of products, for example, in clothes to minimise bacterial activity and odours, or in chopping boards, again to minimise bacterial activity and to maintain food health. And these materials are increasingly used, and there's ongoing research looking at what the impacts might be when they enter into water bodies, and also at how effective water treatment systems are at removing these materials. Again, the impact of chemical waste within the environment depends on the nature of the compound, because they have different toxicities, and also how mobile they are in the environment and what reactions influence them. But chemical waste can affect humans and other animals. It can result in poisoning due to heavy metals such as mercury or lead, and there are some quite famous examples from the last century when there was improper disposal of these heavy metals from industrial production, which resulted in them entering water supplies and causing disease and death. Other effects of chemical waste is in disrupting the functioning of endocrines, and that can affect growth and reproduction in humans and animals, birds and fish, and alter hormonal signals within the body. The final water pollutant I'm going to talk about is saltwater intrusion. And this occurs mainly in coastal areas and can affect both surface and groundwater resources. In groundwater resources, in aquifers, in areas, and in areas which have been affected by salt in the past, the aquifer is divided into freshwater and saline water. And the fresh water, because it's less dense, floats like a lens on the surface of the saline water. But if you over-abstract the fresh water from the aquifer, it disturbs the boundary between the fresh water and the saline water, and means that you take up saline water in your well, and this isn't suitable for agricultural use or drinking use. If this water is used for irrigation, then it results in salinisation and degradation of agricultural land because of the high salt content. In some cases where water resources are scarce, a quite expensive and energy-intensive process called reverse osmosis can be used to treat saline water from aquifers affected by saltwater intrusion. And in fact, this has been used in southeast England, where surface water resources are quite scarce, but groundwater resources have been affected by saline intrusion. So this process has been used in order to obtain water resources in these situations.